Well, Tigers camp keeps marching along, which is great for us because that means we always have something to talk about. We'll discuss the news and notes from camp as well as starting our player preview series all today on Locked On Tigers.
You are Locked On Tigers, your daily Detroit Tigers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Tigers. I'm, of course, your host, Scott Bentley. Today is Tuesday, February 18th, 2025. Thank you so much for making Locked On Tigers your first listen. Every single day, we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Welcome in, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Today, we are going to discuss the news and notes from Tigers camp over the last few days, dating back to the weekend, obviously, because yesterday we did not talk about the news and notes out of camp. Not that there's a ton to talk about. We'll probably only spend the first segment going over any, news and notes from Tigerville, and then we will jump into the first of our player preview series, which is going to be Jake Rogers, as I'm now realizing isn't a big surprise because it will assuredly be in the title of the episode. So you already knew that. Welcome in. Let's talk about the goings of camp. There's always a bunch of small stuff going on because there's always a bunch of, again, like as I said at the end of last week, this is the first time that a lot of these guys have been talking to the media in 4 or 5 months. First time that the organization is out in front of camera again for the, first time, I guess, in the calendar year. And so the first week or so, you always get a ton of really small kind of tidbits or videos, right? That's like everyone's favorite thing. Mine as well. I'm not looking down at anybody. I'm a sucker for them too, but it's just really funny the reaction always to spring training, like backfield batting practice. It's like, well, this is everything to me now, and that's okay. First off, Colt Keith's defense at first base. I think Evan Petzold of the Freep, I believe, but I'm sure that a few of the beat writers have been all over it, posted a video online of him and Torkelson kind of going back and forth of Colt Keith and Torkelson, not Evan Petzold of the Freep, who actually I'm sure would be a pretty decent first baseman. It's interesting. He doesn't look this is overanalyzing. Okay, I'm fully admitting that he doesn't look like incredible there, but I don't think he looks completely lost at the position either. Again, this is like coaching ground balls, where to put your foot on the bag. Like Alan Trammell's there pointing stuff out. It's very, very simple and slowed down. This is not like we're going to be able to tell exactly what kind of defender he is over there, but nice to see him get reps. That's clearly he's going to be the first baseman, or at least the plan is for him to be the first baseman this year. And as we talked about yesterday, the only way that changes is if we look at him at first base now and go, wow, he looks so terrible that I actually don't think you can even put him there. That's the only way. Even if he looks like, if you think he looks bad or if he's struggling out there, but still, looks like a professional baseball player at least, he's going to be the first baseman. I think that is plan A. And anything else that comes after that is only due to a catastrophic failure. So, he is good. He's an athlete. He's an athletic dude. He's built like a truck, and he's pretty darn fast as well for how big he is. So he has the range. This is a similar conversation, I guess, to what we talked about with him at second base. He has the range to do it. It's just a matter of the footwork and the timing and the glove work of everything, of how effective he's going to be at the position, because he's athletic enough. Now, if that sounds familiar, fair enough, because this is almost verbatim what we say about Torkelson, saying scooping, which Torkelson is for some reason like the best I've ever seen at. So it's fascinating that it's a very similar tone here as we talk about a new first baseman over there defensively. Speaking of Torkelson, there was some video I've watched the video from Cody Stavenhagen of The Athletic, but again, I'm sure other people are tweeting out plenty of videos too. Torkelson taking batting practice. It was from the side. It was from the third baseline. Obviously, Cody's not going to be standing on pitcher's mound behind the pitcher, getting video from his iPhone or whatever. But it is noticeable, and Cody's the first one that I saw at least point this out. There is a little bit of a I don't even know if it's a toe tap. He is lifting his front foot a little bit more, which is something that we've talked about a lot, and not even specifically that he needs to lift his front foot a little bit more, but just the balance of his swing, period, has been something we've talked about on this show for years. The mechanics of his swing, they're not like a train wreck or awful or anything, but the way that his weight shifts and the way that his weight shifts and the way that he is balancing himself in the batter's box has, I think, been something that could be improved. And when we hear about, he doesn't want to change his swing or whatnot over the years, that's been part of the frustration with that. I think AJ kind of calmed everybody down with the whole I think it's fair to call it an overreaction, probably on my part too, with, I don't watch video of myself thing and I don't use analytics and whatnot. AJ said he's like, everybody watches video of themselves. He will watch video of himself. He's just trying to simplify the game. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that. So we'll see what happens, but it does look like that front foot is doing a little bit of something different than we were used to seeing in the past from Torkelson. And not that one change is necessarily going to be the difference between what we saw, last year and him being a bona fide 1-1 pick or anything, but he is making changes. This, narrative that he is not doing anything. Clearly he is trying stuff and trying to make adjustments. The only other big picture type of thing that I want to discuss out of camp is Kerry Carpenter and his desire to hit more against left-handed pitching. That is one of the most talked about things in this fan base over the last, since Carpenter got called up, really, over the last going on 3 seasons. It's something that is talked about ad nauseum when the Tigers offense is quiet and Kerry Carpenter gets pinch hit for or doesn't start a ball game. Now we have to remember, he almost always is going to get an at bat at some point, but AJ has been, at least with him, very, very keen on not giving him a ton of opportunities against lefties. And last year, he didn't do well in the few opportunities he did have against them. But I also think it's very fair to point out, well, how are you supposed to get better if you don't actually ever face them? And so Carpenter said, there's a great article by Evan Petzold of The Free, fantastic. And he said, Kerry Carpenter said straight up, I want to play more against lefties, and I am going to ask AJ directly every single spring training game where a lefty starts or he's on the bench and a lefty comes into the game, if he can get an opportunity against them. And if AJ says yes, then he's going to go out there and get an opportunity against them. And if AJ says no, he's going to take one of the lefty pitchers in the Tigers organization and go to the backfield and take at-bats against lefties anyway. I think that's a great mindset. We'll see if it leads to anything. Again, in a small sample size of major league experience, he has not hit well against left-handed pitching. But I think the reason why a lot of people want him to get more opportunities, aside from just the fact that he crushes righties, and it's like, all right, well, if we can even get half of this against lefties, that'd be sweet. Aside from that simple fact, it's also that in the minors, when he adjusted his swing and really figured out his stride and his mechanics and how to repeat his swing, he wasn't a platoon player. Like Kerry Carpenter in Double-A post, kind of him blowing onto the scene and kind of blowing up, did hit well against both-handedness. So, he's always going to be better against right-handed pitching, and there's more righties on the mound than lefties. So, good for him and good for the Tigers. But he wants to take that next step, and you'll hear me talk about this again later with Jake Rogers in our player preview. If he can hit against lefties, Kerry Carpenter, if he can even be a 715 to 750 OPS hitter against lefties, A, his value skyrockets, but B, That's easily the most important thing. His value goes through the roof. You're talking about a guy that legitimately would become one of the better, like, pure hitters in baseball if he even had a 750 OPS against lefties. But on top of that, it gives AJ significantly more lineup flexibility, and he can mix and match a lot more stuff. And that is obviously something that will only play into the Tigers' benefit, as we saw last season. Okay, let's get to a break here. Then on the other side, we'll talk about Alex Lange for like 2 seconds and then preview Jake Rogers and his 2025 campaign. We'll do all of that right after this. Got to talk to you today about our friends over at Select Quote. In sports, having a winning strategy is really everything. It's how the best teams make it to the Super Bowl, the World Series, and the Olympics. The same goes for life. Having a strategy like life insurance from Select Quote can protect your financial legacy and keep your family's future secure. Select Quote makes it easy to find the perfect insurance policy as one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, and they've helped over 2 million customers find $700 billion in coverage since 1985. What sets Select Quote apart from their competitors really is their personal touch. Unlike other brokers that offer one-size-fits-all policies, their licensed agents tailor coverage to fit your unique needs. If you're in good health, you might even qualify for same-day coverage of up to $5 million. No medical exam required. And it's more affordable than you'd think. You can get up to $1 million in coverage for as little as $20 a month. You get the right life insurance for you for less. Go to selectquote.com/lockedon. Go to selectquote.com/lockedon today to get started. That's selectquote.com/lockedon. Select Quote, they shop, you save. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Segment 2, Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in. As always, making us your first listen every single day. Shots to everydayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, be back tomorrow as we talk about any news and notes from camp and keep our player preview series that is kicking off today underway, or kicking underway is today. We're going to keep it rolling. We're going to keep it going after today where it becomes underway. I'm done trying to make that work. Alex Lange on the 60-day injured list officially. That happened right after I recorded yesterday's show, so happened over the weekend. Not a huge surprise. Doesn't really mean anything in terms of when he'll be ready to be back or anything like that. Like, this was kind of expected. He had a major injury and a major surgery, and I don't think the plan was ever like purely opening day. But it does sound like he will be ready probably not too long after, and may even get some work at the end of spring training, but we'll see what happens with him. We'll keep an eye on that. As I've said, worded very poorly, we're going to kick off our player preview series. Jake Rogers is going to go first. I was thinking about it after I did my show prep and wrote down, all the notes I wanted to write down in regards to Jake Rogers, that I feel like I might start with catchers like every year we do this. This is a regular thing every spring training for those who this is maybe your first season or you weren't here for this time of year, February, March of last year. We do a player preview series every year, kind of go through the roster, really do a deep dive on what I'm expecting out of the player going forward, and kind of the expectations, I guess, is the way to put it, in 2025. And I just feel like I love catchers so much. I caught my whole life pretty much. Like, I just want to talk about catchers all the time, and so I just burn through them immediately. And I don't know, that kind of amused me. But Jake Rogers, I really do think is going to be – this is an interesting conversation because I think a decent amount of offense, it goes without saying at the catcher position, but really throughout the whole lineup can kind of ride on the shoulders of Jake Rogers. Not trying to say that he should ever be like in the top half of the lineup or a guy that you consistently rely on for run support or should be one of your best hitters. Certainly not. He's probably going to hit 8th or 9th this season, especially early on. But I think that the outlook of this lineup changes significantly if he hits closer to what he did in 2023 versus what he put up in 2024, because those were very, very different seasons. He's 29 years old. This will be his age 30 season, as he'll turn 30 pretty early on in the year, like only a week or two into the season in April. In 2024, he put up 2.2 Fangraphs WAR, which is the WAR I prefer for catchers. Had a 197 batting average, a 255 on base percentage, a 352 slug. Not very good offensively. That is just a 607 OPS. Let's talk about what he is great at, and that is defense. You got to be pretty darn impressive defensively to put up over a 2-win season with those offensive numbers, and that is because he had a +8 in blocks above average. This your ability to block the ball when compared to the average catcher. That ranks in the 89th percentile, just outside of being top 10% in the league at that position. Framing, we know, is one of his strong suits. Going to be interesting to see how his value is affected when inevitably the challenge system for balls and strikes comes to the major league level, but that won't be happening this year. So we still get all of the value of his +9 framing from a year ago. That is in the 91st percentile. One of the 9% best in baseball. He calls a great game. He's Tarek Skubal's catcher. And I think he caught every single Tarek Skubal start from a year ago, if I'm not mistaken. I'm trying to remember. I know Carson Kelly didn't catch one. I'm trying to think if maybe Dingler or something got in for a game. But I'm fairly confident that starting at least, Jake Rogers caught every single Tarek Skubal start. And, his arm was a huge focal point when he was a prospect. When the trade happened, it's crazy. He's 30. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's just wild. That shows how long ago the Verlander trade was already. But when that trade first happened and he was in, AA, everyone talked about his arm. Like, he's got a cannon, and he came up and he did have a great arm. Then the Tommy John happened and he missed a whole season. In 2023, he didn't have a poor arm, but it was kind of average, and the analytics backed that up. Caught stealing numbers were around average, but even just like the arm strength and whatnot that he showed out there, just in terms of velocity and stuff, it was, average-ish arm. And so that was something we talked about keeping an eye on last year. It was like, okay, he's got a full year of recovery and rehab under his belt on this arm. Maybe in 2024 he'll be better. And it was. It wasn't substantial. It wasn't some huge jump where he just turned into, like having the best arm in baseball or anything like that. But it was an improvement over 2023. I'm not expecting another step forward. I'm just expecting him to maintain having a positive arm. And if he can do that, then I'm a pretty darn happy camper there. So defensively, we know what he can do. And, some people, there was a few games last year where he had really timely passed balls. Those are tricky. Not all of them, but a lot of the ones that I can remember, which I'm thinking of 3 off the top of my head. One in Chicago specifically that was absolutely brutal. If you watch, he is in a framing position because there is a man on third for a lot of those. And that guy's obviously not stealing. So you don't need to be upright in the catching stance of, I need to be ready to throw somebody out. So you get down on one knee because objectively the numbers back it up these days. We have plenty of information. Your framing numbers increase when you get lower to the ground and go down on one knee like that, especially at the bottom half of the strike zone. So those instances are brutal, but if that's an AJ is saying like, hey, get in position to frame because there's nobody that's going to steal a base that's currently on. So prioritize that. Now, get in front of the ball. You're a pro, you're a major leaguer, and I'm sure he would tell you the same thing. But that's like my really catching nerd, like nitpicky thing right there. I would really like him to, if you're going to sell out on the framing, you need to be able to get in front of the ball still. You need to find a way. I don't care if you practice it all spring or work down in the winter, but you cannot have the amount of late game pass ball, wild pitch, whatever you want to rule them as, that occurred with really this catching tandem as a whole last season. Not that it was happening like every day or anything like that. I'm not trying to make it a bigger deal than it is. Make a hill. What is it? Make a mountain out of a molehill, anthill, whatever the saying goes. But that's something, again, if I'm super overcritical and super overanalyzing just because I love catching, that's something I'd like to see tightened up a little bit. Let's talk about his offense, because we talk about how great the defense is and how that's obviously his strong suit. Last year, the offense was far from that. What can we expect in 2025? We'll talk about all of that right after this. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Third and final segment, Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in as always. So, the offense was obviously not great. We can just kind of call it what it is. We don't have to beat around the bush with that one. He did have a career low in strikeout rate, which I want to point out. I say that like with a smirk on my face a little bit. It was still 29.4%, which is still not great and still toward the top of baseball. You're still talking about that top 20 to 15% in highest K rate. So it's not good, but it is a career low over a season for him. And that's like pretty much where the quote unquote good news stops for his offense in 2024. Batting average, as we said earlier, was 197, sub 200. He is never going to be a high batting average guy, which I want to make abundantly clear. But obviously it has to be somewhat better. Either that or he can keep the batting average at 197, but he better walk like, 13% of the time or anything or something like that. You know what I mean? You can't have the OBP numbers that he had. And obviously a lot of that just goes into how good his average is in that situation. So 2023, I want to bring up the 2023 stat line for Jake Rogers. He hit 221 with a 286 on base percentage and a 444 slug. He hit 21 homers, had a 20 home run season in just over 100 games, and a 730 OPS. I look at those numbers and I say, golly, I would love for that to be his stat line again. I would take that in a heartbeat, gladly. It's not even anything, like super, you're talking about a 221 hitter, but 20 homers in 100 games and a OPS that in 2023 was just barely below league average. If he did it last year, it would have been above league average. I would take that instantly. Even if we get closer or around his career average OPS, which is 663, not asking for the world here, right? And, he's going to hit 9, like we said earlier. He's going to hit 8 or 9 most days, especially early in the season. If he starts raking, then we'll have a different conversation in the middle of May or June about him moving up in the lineup. But like to start off the year, he's going to be down in the lineup card. And he's going to be your big time plus defender. The biggest thing that needs to change this year, and I think will change, I do, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a second when I just talk about my expectations for 2025, is his numbers against left-handed pitching. This dude's whole life, he has crushed lefties. And for whatever reason, 2024, he was awful against them. I'm going to read his OPS against left-handed pitching by year for literally every year of his major league career. Don't care how many games he played, whether it was 30 like he did in 2019 or whether it was a full season like he has the last 2 years. Okay. 2019, 994. 2021, 909. 2023, 857. And that's a full season, unlike 2019 and 2021. 2024, it was a whopping 499. That is an OPS, not a slug. That's an OPS of 499 and a batting average of 169 against left-handed pitching. He has done nothing but crush these pitchers his whole life, and last year just stopped. And that is why the offensive numbers plummeted. His numbers against righties honestly aren't too different, which is mind-boggling considering the OPS difference was like 130 points. They really aren't that different against righties. year over year. And if we go even deeper into this, it's specifically his ability to hit left-handed pitching fastballs. In 2023, against all variations of fastballs, so that's fastballs, sinkers, cutters can be thrown in there depending. Two-seamers are kind of just considered sinkers these days, but anything that is a variation of a fastball is all thrown into one category. 2023, he hit 298 against fastballs from left-handed pitchers and had a slug, I hope you're sitting down and not driving, an 809. That is Barry Bonzian against fastballs from left-handed pitchers. In 2024, he hit 178 with a slug of 244. I was trying to think of a funny joke of like a player to be like, oh, remember when I can't even think of anybody who had a slug of 244 over a legitimate period of time. That is what he did. That is the 1 year difference just against fastballs thrown from lefties. That is almost the entire difference in his offensive output from a year ago. If he just changes that, you're talking about a completely different hitter. Because the season stats are way different, despite his production against righties and his off-speed and breaking ball numbers against lefties not being too terribly different. Obviously, there's a little bit of fluctuation in there. So if he just squares up left-handed fastballs, we are back, baby. We are back in business. If he crushes lefties again as well, and I'm not even asking for, a slug over 800, but if he can just hit well against lefties again, that also, as we mentioned earlier with Kerry Carpenter, really opens up the door for more lineup flexibility with AJ Hinch. I'm going to take you back in time to the beginning of the 2024 season when AJ Hinch, it was laughed at the time, and he did not last very long, put out the 2-catcher lineup because Carson Kelly was hitting well, and Jake Rogers, the Jake Rogers we knew from 2023 at that point in like April or May of 2024, dominated against left-handed pitching. So a lefty was on the mound, and we put Jake Rogers at DH and Carson Kelly behind the plate, or vice versa, whatever it ended up being. And then Jake Rogers was terrible against lefties, so that never lasted. That instantly becomes back into the fold. Not that it would be a regular occurrence, but depending on how Dingler's hitting, especially, you have that flexibility. Even if it's not to start them, you then have the flexibility of, okay, late in the game, DH is up. Kerry Carpenter didn't figure out how to hit lefties. I can bring in Jake Rogers off the bench to be my DH, and he can go pinch hit against some, high velo lefty closer. It opens the door for so much more. It makes your lineup instantly deeper and much more valuable, and gives you a power threat that you just lost. This is a guy whose slug dropped almost 100 points year over year. 100. He again had 21 home runs. He had 10 in 2024, and his slug was 352. Harold Castro puts up higher slugging percentages than 352. And it's all just because he didn't hit the ball enough to be able to showcase the power that he obviously does have. So in 2025, I'm expecting a bounce back season from Jake Rogers, and obviously the maintained great defense that he has, which if both of those things happen, is a great year. He is so valuable behind the dish. If you can put up as I said earlier, a 2-win season with the brutal offensive output that he did record, we're talking about a guy that even with an OPS of like 650 to 680 could be like pushing a 3-WAR catcher, which for those who are unaware, if you are anywhere around 3 or higher as your output for WAR behind the dish, that's like borderline to just straight up top 5 catching production in baseball almost every single year. So I'm not going to necessarily go out that far and be like, he's going to be a top 5 catcher in baseball this year. But he's been just outside the top 10 the last 2 years. And if he can just put it all together, if we can get the defense from 2024 and the offense of 2023, and obviously, again, the ability to hit lefties in 2023, then I think you're talking about a guy that could be really, really valuable. And we know what he is. He is a big uppercut swing, good pitching manager, good game manager, great defender, great clubhouse guy, great mustache when he decides to grow it. The one thing that I would like to see inherently change is I want to see him walk more. He doesn't expand the zone. He swings and misses a ton. He doesn't chase, though. He has really good chase rates and has his whole career. I think it's preposterous that he doesn't walk more. In fact, his walk numbers actually went down a decent amount from 2023 to 2024. And I think that's absurd. Going into the year, I asked for him to walk more, and he walked less. Let's get back in the driver's seat there. Just with the eye that he has, there is legitimately no reason why he should not be walking more than he does. So I know that's like a lot to ask, but at a minimum, I expect him to hit far better against lefties this year than he did last year. And that by itself, even with the copy and paste same production in every other area, is going to make him, gain half a win to a whole win, depending on how many plate appearances he gets against lefties this year. So that's what I'm expecting from Jake Rogers. The catcher position hinges a lot on his production, man. And obviously some of that is just going to come down to what we get out of Dylan Dingler, and what kind of offensive production he can put up. But if you are talking about a Jake Rogers that hits lefty, I'm a broken record, but like hits lefties better and is similar against righties, you're talking about a guy that could even flirt with like 115 to 120 games played, and Dylan Dingler could really just be kind of a once a series type of catcher. But that, again, obviously depends on Dingler's part as well. So I really like Jake Rogers this year. I'm pretty high on him, and I expect somewhat of a bounce back year from what we saw a season ago. That's kind of where I stand with him. Thanks for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, be back tomorrow. I appreciate you all greatly. Peace and love. Going to therapy's dope, and I'll catch y'all then, baby. Go Tigers.